Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Stephen Kingcast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I will review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication. And this week, I am reviewing 2014's adaptation of the Skeleton Crew short story Gramma, titled Mercy. Mercy stars The Walking Dead's Chandler Riggs, Francis O'Connor, Joel Courtney, Mark Duplass, and Dylan McDermott, and it's directed by Peter Cornwell. I'm going to get to the review in a second, but first I want to read some listener mail. A few weeks ago, I read an email from Craig. Craig writes again, and for those of you who didn't listen to that particular episode, I believe it was in the review of Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf, the Corey Haim vehicle, pun totally intended, werewolf movie, and I started off reading some listener mail, and I got this one email from Craig, and the two of us wrote back and forth about the creative process, and he has just a little addendum that he would like to add. So what about the majority of Twain, SK readers, Lost viewers, etc., who simply enjoy the book/TV show for its entertainment value and could care less about analyzing, critiquing the guts of the matter? That is a huge and such an important question. Now, I listened to, I guess my answer to this, I just want to share a very brief anecdote. I'm going to pull from the guys of the /Filmcast and typically what they say about this particular matter, because the host, Dave Chen, who's a Renaissance man, for those of you who don't know, if you're not listening to the /Filmcast, I strongly encourage you to do so, especially if you miss, Siskel and Ebert and Roper. The guys on the /Filmcast, David Chen, Devendra Hardwar, and Jeff Kanata, they are so good at being able to discuss a movie, critique it, and respectfully argue each other's points and disagree with one another. It's fun. They always do a really fun job, but at the same time, it's always very, very professionally done. They have great insights, and Dave is not only is he a podcast reviewer for /Filmcast, he also did The One Who Knocks, which was a Breaking Bad. He does A Cast of Kings with Joanna Robinson, who is also fantastic. And A Cast of Kings is the Game of Thrones podcast that they do. And Dave also, he's a movie producer. He just made a film this past year starring Stephen Tobolowsky, who is probably most famously known from Groundhog Day. And he's also an incredible cellist. So very, very inspired by the workmanship in David Chen. But Dave, one of the things that he has mentioned before, because he always gets slammed for always finding fault with things, he said that for some people, the enjoyment process does come from reviewing and analyzing and critiquing, that this is enjoyment for some people. And for me, and for reviewers and analysts and critics, part of the enjoyment does come from understanding what the standard is that the artist has set for him or herself, and holding that artist to that standard, and measuring whether a particular piece holds up to that standard, and whether the medium be a poem, a short story, a novel, a painting, a piece of music, an album, a television show as a whole, or episode by episode, or a movie, does that particular artist work within the tools given to them within that particular medium, and do they use the tools effectively to create the art? I think that for me, I can't help but view things that way. And I totally get it if people just want to enjoy it for what it is. Because I keep saying last week, but in the last email that Craig had sent that I read, he described challenging his college professor over a Mark Twain analysis, and said, what if he just wanted to make money off of it? And I think that's a very, very valid point. I'm currently rereading it at the time of this publication, and there is a quote, there's a scene in it that sticks with me all the time when I think about what I'm doing here. And I haven't gotten there yet in the reread, but like I said, it's always stuck with me, especially because I was an English major. But there's a scene, a flashback, in which Bill Denbrough, I guess you'd call him the main character of the book, is in college, and he says to his professor, why can't a story just be a story? Why do we have to find meaning where otherwise there might not be any meaning? So it's a very, very valid, very, very valid point, and that's from Stephen King. So the last time I read one of Craig's emails, he said, what if I was fortunate enough to have lunch with Stephen King, how would he feel about the analysis? And I personally think that Stephen King probably would tell me to find something better to do with my time, which is totally understandable, because there are people out there that just want a story to be a story, and there are people that just want to sit and they want to watch television, and it's fine, or a movie, and it's fine. But I'm personally not someone that can do that now, because I see the way, I guess, the sausage is made. I see the way things are constructed, and I like talking about how things are constructed and whether or not they're constructed as well as they could be. So for me, my enjoyment personally comes about from the reviewing process. But for those that don't, then you're just able to sit back and let everything wash over you, which is, from a philosophical standpoint, that sounds amazing. But anyway, Craig continues to write, I really did like your bit about how SK gets the reader to buy into his characters so readily. Like you said, by page 5 of Revival, you care about them. His wife, Sue, who also wrote in a wonderful email. Sue and I have discussed, reread, and dissected how he does this, and I think that you are right by suggesting syntax and word choices. So, Craig, again, thank you for writing in. This is great because your emails are really making me think, and I really appreciate that, and I really like being able to share them with the rest of the world. Okay, so that's all that I have for listener mail right now. Keep them coming, everyone, because I really do enjoy putting them out there. All right, so now I want to get into the 2014 movie Mercy, based on the Skeleton Crew short story Gramma. Now, I remember hearing about it when it was coming out, and I was excited. We got another Stephen King movie coming out, because when I started this podcast, it was because I felt that there was we had hit a point where Stephen King kind of had fallen out of favor in terms of pop culture conversation. So anytime a new movie comes out, I see it as the potential to reignite the flame that he once was, and to put him back on the top of the pop culture conversation that I would say is currently held by George R.R. Martin. But I think that ultimately that George R.R. Martin is going to be challenged in the next few years as the Stand 4-part series from Warner Brothers gets off the ground, and New Line Cinema's 2-part It, directed by True Detective's Corey Fukunaga, starts to gather some steam. So I think that between those two projects, which is 6 movies, King is going to come back in a big way. But regardless, when Mercy came out, I said, okay, it's starring, Chandler Riggs, who plays Corl from The Walking Dead. So that's great. And Dylan McDermott is, established. And Joel Courtney, who is the star of Super 8, and he was awesome in Super 8, great child actor. And, Frances O'Connor, most famously known, I would say, probably from Steven Spielberg and Stanley Kubrick's AI. So, I mean, we had some characters. We had some talent there. And then all of a sudden I didn't really hear anything about the movie. Then I knew it was just on video on demand. And then I did some research, and the studio just dumped it onto video on demand. There was no publicity around it. There was no promotion whatsoever. And then I saw it in Best Buy when I was just walking through Best Buy, and I picked it up, and I'm looking on the front, and the front, I believe, says from the director of A Haunting in Connecticut, from the producers of Paranormal Activity, starring The Walking Dead's Chandler Riggs, but it doesn't say anything about Stephen King. It doesn't say Stephen King's Mercy. It doesn't say based on the short story from Stephen King. And on the back, I'm looking at the synopsis on the back, and it says, something like 12-year-old George goes to live with his grandmother and blah, 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 and it goes on. And again, it doesn't say based on the short story Gramma from Stephen King. Mercy is a story about 12-year-old George. It doesn't say that. In fact, the only time it says Stephen King on the Blu-ray at all is in the bottom, the very, very bottom, with the credits, directed by, starring, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And then in the middle of it, very small, it says, based on the short story Grandma by Stephen King. Well, that hurt my heart. That whoever put this together, the executives and the marketing team, they looked at it and they analyzed it, and they said that this would draw in more viewers if they promoted A Haunting in Connecticut, The Walking Dead, and Paranormal Activity, and not Stephen King, and to not even mention Stephen King at all. Like I said, that stuck with me. That I don't understand. That to me kind of blows my mind. I mean, A Haunting in Connecticut is a forgettable film. Nothing memorable about it. And that's advertised, but not the master of the genre in which this movie was released. So that to me, that spoke volumes about what I said. Stephen King not being in the cultural conversation the way that he once was. Ultimately, I think that it's good for Stephen King that his name is not really found on this, as this is an awful, awful movie. We begin with an establishing shot of rolling hills, which would easily be mistaken for Ireland, which I think is pretty cool, before the title reveals that we are, in fact, in West Virginia, 1967. An old farmhouse stands on top of a hill beside a gnarled and creepy tree. So we're doing good so far. Inside is a not well-looking man, looking like he's about to do his best Jack Nicholson impersonation on his wife, who's holding a newborn, before flipping the axe and smashing his head, killing himself. And then creepy music starts to play over time-lapse shots of trees and hills and fields, and it feels less like the US and more like Europe, which to me, it works. It makes everything feel older with more history, and at this point, I'm into it, and I'm giving this movie the benefit of the doubt. And then the camera takes inside a house where all of a sudden we're subjected to horrific paintings of monsters and demons, and immediately I start checking out. Okay, until now, the setting has been unsettling enough. Now this just starts tipping it too far. It's too much. It's too in your face. It's trying to tell you, this is scary. And I'm responding, no, it's not. Unless you provide the proper context for something, it's not scary. A scary painting is not scary unless there's a reason for it to be scary. And if it's just a gruesome looking image, all it is just paint on a canvas. You need to show me why it's scary. It just can't be. You just can't throw something out there and say, this is scary.
It's fun to introduce kids to the things we love, like punk rock. But one thing we shouldn't introduce them to is lottery tickets, because they can put kids at risk of developing a gambling problem in the future. So introduce them to music, not lottery tickets.
Go ahead, sweetie. Try the E chord. Let's keep practicing.
Learn more at mass.gov/youthgambling. A message from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health.
So we wind up getting a voiceover soon after from Corl himself, teenage girl dreamboat Chandler Riggs. He states that he's always been best friends with his grandma, which could not be any more different from the depiction of George from the short story. In the short story, as you'll probably remember, George was terrified of Grandma. We then fade into a scene with Corl getting beat up by a group of boys while very serious, and capital V, capital S, very serious music plays. And Grandma gives him a speech about being outsiders and being strong. While walking through rich fields, we encounter Grandma's grave, complete with a curse. And hey, there's a rattlesnake there for no good reason. And then Grandma gives Corl a violin to calm down the snake. And I have no idea what's going on in this movie already, and I don't care that I don't know what's going on. The only thing that I'm hoping at this point is that the rigidity of the dialogue just starts to ease up, because I want a little bit more fluidity and organic quality between the actors and the lines that they have to speak. Because, she says things like, if you can stand up to a beast, you can stand up to a bully. And it's so just rigid and stiff. So Grandma says that. Seconds later, Corl knocks the kid out. And hey, that's it. That's all that we see of the bully story. At dinner, Grandma has a seizure and falls. Grandma, codenamed Mercy, by the way, starts attacking her grandchildren, but stops at Corl because love. Grandma tells George that he's coming and he needs to get out of there. Cuts to 1 year later, and I'm going to stop right here. So far, I'm impressed with the location scout who picked the setting for the movie. Aside from that, I'm pretty worried about what I'm going to be sitting through. In the 9 minutes and 3 seconds I've been watching, we've had an establishing flashback sequence with young Grandma, a flashback for Georgie 1 year before, in which we get a very forced scene of dialogue between the two characters that fails to demonstrate their relationship with one another to the point that it required narration to do the job for us. We have two bully scenes completely disjointed from one another, and Chandler Riggs plays pre- and post-bullying exactly the same, so the bully plot thus far is pointless and static, and the bullying plot is never revisited again, so it's pointless. However, things take an interesting turn when it's revealed that George has an imaginary friend. It's a nice twist that I honestly didn't see coming. And until the point where George's teacher asked who he's talking to, I was about to write a comment about the scene being groan-worthy. Dylan McDermott shows up with an accent, kind of, sometimes. He flirts with Frances O'Connor, and very clumsily they drop the information that he has a wife, which we know is going to come into play later in the movie. While alone in the house, Corl hears creepy sounds and lifts a rug. We then meet Uncle Len, who's presented as the anti-Dylan McDermott, trying too hard, unfriendly. Then an actor by the name of Joe Agender shows up as an orderly to provide the necessary tidbits of the importance of holding a Bible while around codename Mercy, and the shots the family has to give her. Agender, by the way, the reason I bring him up, he looks so much like Giovanni Ribisi, I found the resemblance to be the scariest thing in this movie so far. Oh no! Scary arms jump out from under the bed. I won't be able to sleep tonight. And then George gets scary mail. Thank goodness! With the U.S. Post Office on the ropes, I applaud director Peter Cornwell for giving us such a harrowing scene that simultaneously supports our country's mail system. Haster's got her, Georgie, the note informs us with giant red scratchy lettering. The apostrophe's there, so whoever wrote it, even though they can't make the letter look presentable, they know enough about possessive nouns, so that's a plus. Then the author of this masterpiece gives George the advice to not just run, but run, in case he was only skimming the note and missed the ending. And just in case the thick lead lettering and the content of the note didn't do the job enough, the music kicks in to remind us that this is supposed to be scary. The music's unnecessary, to say the least. With the fact that the only thing I receive in the mail are bills, checking the mail is easily the scariest part of my day. I don't need scary music to tell me it's scary. Trust me, if you saw my bank account, you'd be scared too. Oh, and this 9-foot red scratchy devilish lettering is clearly Aunt Jenny's handwriting, according to Mama Corl, forensic handwriting expert. Now let's take a look here at Joel Courtney. Now this kid was poised to be a star after his breakout role in J.J. Abrams' Super 8. And I'm disappointed that he's relegated to playing second fiddle to Chandler Riggs. I believe that he deserves better, and I'm hoping that he has a future. Though he doesn't demonstrate the same skills in this movie as he did in that one, I think that I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Because if you haven't seen Super 8, it hinges on his performance. And
running a business is hard enough, so why make it harder with a dozen different apps that don't talk to each other? One for sales, another for inventory, a separate one for accounting. Before you know it, you are drowning in software instead of growing your business. This is where Odoo comes in. Odoo is the only business software you'll ever need. It's an all-in-one, fully integrated platform that handles everything: CRM, accounting, inventory, e-commerce, HR, and more. No more app overload. No more juggling logins. Just one seamless system that makes work easier. And the best part, Odoo replaces multiple expensive platforms for a fraction of the cost. It's built to grow with your business, whether you are just starting out or already scaling up. Plus, it's easy to use, customizable, and designed to streamline every process, so you can focus on what really matters: running your business. Thousands of businesses have made the switch, so why not you? Try Odoo for free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
And Ellie Fanning? Yeah, it's Ellie Fanning. Those two child actors do such an incredible job working off each other, the chemistry with each other. Joel Courtney's eyes are so emotive. It was very disheartening to see him in this particular movie. Now, in this movie, he's a super taster and loves to cook. Fortunately, he's cooking for West Virginians, who apparently have never heard of sushi, because they hilariously point out that it's undercooked and should be put on the grill. How will this city boy ever make his dream of being a chef come true in this backwoods West Virginia town? Find out in the Stephen King classic Mercy, now on Netflix streaming. Then Dylan McDermott and his wife start talking about the death wolf, which walks between two worlds and eats your soul. So now we know where the pictures in the opening credits came from, and I still don't care. Corl goes into the cellar, where the West Virginians have forgotten to put in a new light bulb because they like their basements like they like their familiarity with sushi in the dark. Then Mark Duplass goes full weird uncle on Corl, grabbing him out of the dark. Now, guys, come on, I know that we're not supposed to like this guy, but this movie is supposed to take place in some sort of recognizable reality, and family members don't just jump out of dark basements no matter how douchey they're supposed to be. What was he even doing in there in the first place? Was he just waiting for the right moment when his sister would ask his nephew to go into an unlit basement so he could show the kid the crumpled up Haster note? It's stuff like that. It's that lazy storytelling that drives me insane. They know that they're going to get a jump scare out of there, but if you think about it for a second, it's not scary at all. Duplass takes Corl for a walk, and he tells the truth about Codename Mercy. Duplass, by the way, the guy does a lot for what he's given. He has a very naturalistic presence on screen, and even though he's supposed to play a creep, there's such a likability to him. You know, even when he's forced to grab Corl and yell about the things that Codename Mercy can do and did to him as a child, you know, he still comes across as likable. Uh-oh, he's got a wood chipper. I'm going to be so surprised when that comes into play later on in the movie. Well, Duplass's warning go as unheeded as Aunt Jenny's note. Not only is Corl not running, he's going around just talking about Haster. So nothing bad is going to come from the fact that Gramma starts babbling in another language. And then Super Taster tells him to leave it alone, and I can't wait for Corl to do the exact opposite. And he doesn't disappoint, emptying out Codename Mercy's drugs. And then, by the way, does anyone not notice that she has violently stabbed her thigh 1 billion times, and it's just never addressed? It's supposed to be this brutal, horrific scene that's completely ripping off The Exorcist, by the way, where she's just stabbing her thigh over and over again with this hypodermic needle, and there's blood everywhere, and that's it. Never touched upon. You'd think that Frances O'Connor would say something about it. Maybe they would address it somehow, but no, it's only there for that. It's just like anything else in this movie. It's just there for a moment, supposed to be scary, but it never gels into anything of substance. So Corl then gets to go visit the priest so he can do the opposite of whatever the priest is going to tell him to do. But at least he's being proactively oppositional. With the priest, we get some Codename Mercy backstory. Because Mercy wanted children and couldn't have them, she turned to devil worship. You know, then Uncle Len dies, and I don't care, and Corl starts talking to the invisible girl, who is now creepifying. You know, her face is pale, her eyes are red-rimmed, she's sitting in shadow. And then Joel, Courtney, and Corl find a witchy book, the Notranonomicon. And then they head to Dylan McDermott's house to talk to the devil wolf woman because I don't care. Something about a book that needs tears on the page to see the lettering or something. And the wood chipper's back. Nothing bad's going to happen here. And then Joel takes some shrapnel to the gut. And Corl tells Mom that he's scared and doesn't want to be left alone. Well, you probably shouldn't have unearthed unholy books, dumped your evil grandmother's medicine down the sink, listened to Aunt Jenny's message at some point. With some time on his hands, he Googles Hastur, which causes Hastur to arrive only after the devil sends them a lovely potted plant. You know, he tends to get a bad rap, but that was a very thoughtful gift. Gramma dies or something, and Visagirl tells Corl to break down the door with the axe in the cellar, but someone's there with the axe. Who could it be? Corl then blunders into a magical circle. Then outside, he sees the devil wolf or whatever it's called. You know, maybe he doesn't. Maybe we just do. I'm not really paying attention at this point. And then Corl visits Dylan McAccent, who in this scene realizes how ridiculous the accent sounded and decide that we'd be all better off if he dropped it all together. Or maybe he was just, witchcraft into having an accent. Big twist. The only thing more unreliable than Jim's accent is Jim himself, who reveals that he sold his soul in order to be with Corl's mom. Jim, honestly, with your potential mother-in-law a demon witch, one future stepson someone that does the exact opposite of what you tell him to do, and the other one a super taster, whatever the hell that is, that's what we call a deal breaker. Corl escapes and blunders around the countryside, finds Aunt Jenny all dead in her car, emotes nothing, answers a phone, starts talking to Mom, who's now back at the house. Invisigirl tells him to keep on running. Corl mans up, returns to the house, blah blah. Codename Mercy cries bloody tears onto the Notranonomicon and throws up all over Corl's face. Then Ghost Grandpa's there with the axe, then he's not. Then the chains fly off Corl's hands because plot. Then Corl has the axe, and we're given flashback to Grandpa's suicide because we forgot what he did, apparently. Then the music builds, then the music dies, so he thinks he's not going to do it. And the music starts again, so we think he totally is. And he totally throws the axe, but he does it over his shoulder into Codename Mercy's head. And hey, it's Hastur. Goofy-looking Hastur. He uses the Notranonomicon to have a lovely conversation with Corl about possessing him, then uses CGI blackness to start to consume him. Then Corl cries like a boss, dropping those tears onto the page and outwitting Hastur at his own game. Then Invisigirl is there, and it's young Codename Mercy all along. Corl buries the Notranonomicon, and his voiceover wraps it all up, saying something about facing challenges as a family, just like Grandma wanted. And then the only mercy I was granted from this movie was when it ended. So, book versus movie. This is where I compare the book versus the movie in a head-to-head battle to see who comes out on top. So we have our book in one corner, Grandma, versus our movie in the other, Mercy. So, let's look at Georgie. So, it's almost not fair to compare the two, because in the book, Georgie was just a kid, but here he's Corl himself. He's troubled, he talks to imaginary friends, he's our narrator, he bullies his older brother. He's not a bad Georgie, but he's a George that exists in a flawed film. So, I'm going to go with Story Georgie because, well, I'll get to the major reasons actually in a little bit. But Story Georgie. Then Mercy versus Grandma. Okay, in the story, she's Grandma. Here, she's Codename Mercy. In the story, Grandma is a terrifying presence. A giant mound of terror. She's a fairy tale witch, the kind that gobbles up lost children in dark woods. Because this movie is being made in 2014 and everything needs to be nicely laid out just so the audience understands what's going on, Codename Mercy receives an origin story. Because nowadays a witch can't be a witch without being given a reason to be a witch. And to muddy things even more, she's never evil, she's just possessed. To paraphrase John Lovett's impersonation of Harvey Fierstein, she just wanted to be loved. Is that so wrong? This decision is so annoying. It's like if Stanley Kubrick had given a backstory to the hag in room 237. We don't need everything to be explained. Why can't Codename Mercy just be a witch? And why does she have to be a nice grandmother who loves her grandchild and be possessed? Only possessed because she sold her soul because she kept having miscarriages? It's like when they made the Texas Chainsaw Remake Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, starring Jessica Biel, and they gave backstory to Leatherface. We don't need it. Sometimes evil can just be evil. Sometimes we can just have a monster be a monster, and let that be the story. So, the reason why I said in the Georgie part, I would get to it. In Georgie in the book is just a kid, and he's in the presence of a legitimate monster. In the movie, Georgie is a kid in the presence of a grandmother who made a bad decision and sold her soul. I'm trying to justify it, but it doesn't matter. I really don't care, because the movie isn't good, and ultimately the movie isn't even worth much of an analysis. It's not a good movie. The story is simple. It's a very simple story. It has a fairy tale like quality. Little kid gonna get gobbled up by an evil witch in a modern day setting. It's that simple. This puts on all this stupid backstory with the grandmother, forced relationships, dumb backstory with the Dylan McDermott character. It's not good. It's not good. It's not a good movie. So that's all that I have. I don't have a definitive thing to really say about it, other than it's not great. And I guess I kind of see why the studio just dumped it onto video on demand without much publicity around it, because it's just not really worth much publicity at all. All right, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed the review of Mercy. And if you have any time on your hands, feel free to write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. You can head on over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts and leave a review. That would greatly help me out. You can follow me on Blue Sky, on TikTok, on Instagram, and on Facebook. And may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I'll see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen Kingcast.